that's a reasonable share. How did it go? I think the right answer is I don't know, right? Because especially the ones who have given multiple mains, most of them have this response that sir de diya hai, abhi dekhte hai kya hoga, right? So mains is one paper unlike prelims where you would not be able to objectively assess the outcome of the paper. You might have a illusion or you might have a feeling that it went well, but objectively you can never say that I'm going to get this much marks. Preferably maybe if you have written a couple of mains, maybe you can have a sense of where things are headed, but very rarely people land up in the exact score range, right? See, I always say this, there are 4 possible outcomes from where we are, right? One, you fail in mains, right? Statistically, a certain large percentage of people will fail in mains, right? Second, you will fail in interview, right? I personally feel failing in mains is better than failing in interview. At least you will have a window. You will have a short period of time. You will think that I should have cleared. I would have done well, right? The problem with clearing mains is that you never know, but by what margin have you scraped through, right? You might be sitting on a edge of 1 mark, 2 mark. You might be sitting on 50 marks. And everyone feels the same, that you have an equal chance. And I think that's how the exam has been designed, right? So failing in interview, second scenario. Third scenario, not the right service or rank, right? And this is everyone who has not gotten an IAS, right? Everybody, whether you get IRS, IPS, most people repeat, right? So, and the fourth is, I think, all is well, right? You land up in a top 50 or you land up with a rank which gives you an IAS in the right state or whatever it is. 3 out of 4 scenarios you will have to write mains again. Pretty clear, right? Because whether you're failing in mains, most of you, many of you who are in the first attempt, this will be seen as a practice attempt. This will be like your first prelims. Most people don't clear in the first prelims, they clear in the second prelims because they carry the experience of attending the first prelims into the second prelims, which helps them give it better. So mains is also like that. If you fail in mains, this is the best thing to happen if you are just scraping through with a little bit of marks. It's not worthwhile, right? Now, you can consider yourself as someone who has a potential to clear mains, one based on your past experience with mains. If this is your second consecutive mains, the probability of you clearing mains is pretty high. Statistically, the highest number of people who appear for interview and get a rank are in the second and third attempt, especially in the second and third mains, right? Second, if you have made substantial improvement in the way you were writing, you were earlier getting 350 marks in the mocks, now you are getting 420, right? That's a significant improvement, and you stand as a pretty good student among your peer group. Also considering that your peer group is a good peer group, right? If you are the smartest person in the room, it does not necessarily mean that it's the best peer group, right? So irrespective of any of these scenario, we have to effectively utilize the next few months. What is the duration we have? Minimum 2.5 months. The worst case scenario of expected timeline of interview is mains is somewhere towards end of December. Early case scenario is as early as end of November. So you're looking at minimum 2.5 months from now, and if you take into account the last 10 or 15 days which some of you would have effectively utilized, then it is another 10-15 days more, right? So you have 2.5 months to. Now the other possible scenario is that you don't clear mains, right? And then you are more likely to have time till end of January. So you are likely to have a gap of 2.5 to 4.5-5 months timeline. That's a lot of time, but not a lot of time also, right? The problem with a lot of time is that it feels like it's a lot of time, but before you know, time goes. You also have to account for some major festivals coming up in the next few months. Winters always brings down your productivity by 30-40%, be it because of pollution, be it because of not being able to get up in the morning, whatever reasons you have, right? So 2.5 to 4.5 to 5 months. This is the estimated timeline that we have with respect to exam, right? Now, how did mains go? How was the paper? Someone very interestingly said that this year's mains paper was AI proof. Right, and that was a very interesting statement to make, because I think the role of AI in preparation has significantly picked up in this mains compared to last mains. I don't think last mains most people were extensively using AI in their preparation. Now, the challenge with the mains paper is that it has become more analytical. Anybody can sit outside the examination hall and say that it's been an easy paper, right? Everything came from every question paper that is being provided. But the experience of sitting and writing that mains in that examination hall is a completely unique experience. You have to think on the foot. You have to, there are ethics questions in society, there are society questions in ethics. Like they are also shuffling and interlinking subjects in such a way that you have to develop the ability to think on the foot. And the irony with respect to mains is that, you know, you'll always get your best points after you come out of the examination hall. You'll always think that, you know, I should have written this point. I should have, kept getting calls at least 2-3 days from the day of mains, people calling and saying that, you know, sir, I could have written 3 more points in this question. And most of them say that, you know, when I was showering, I remembered this, right? You get a lot of ideas when you are outside the examination hall, right? And what happens is that, it's AI proof because you have to think on the foot, you have to apply, you have to contextualize, you have to differentiate your answers in such a way that you get higher marks compared to others, right? The overall judgment that we have heard with respect to the paper is that paper 1 was slightly unpredictable because there were certain questions which was not on traditional lines from areas that was not expected, right? And I think that tends to usually bring down the score, right? Paper 2 was on a tougher side. Many people say that it was easy, but there were questions which were required to think on the foot and write. Paper 3 is more or less a straightforward question. This is what the general opinion is. Paper 4 has been lengthy, right? Now, whenever the paper becomes general or common, it becomes extremely difficult to differentiate your answers from the peer group, right? Now, when you write in a mock test, most of you take more time than you require. You are used to, most of you are used to writing in 3 hours 15, minimum 3 hours 15 to 3.5 hours, 3 hours 45 minutes. But when the examination happens at UPSC mains, you don't have that bandwidth, and you would have experienced that the quality of answers in the last half an hour, 45 minutes would have been largely compromised, right? This is one area that where you would have significant opportunity to enhance your preparation, right? Now, I think first thing is to analyze how did my mains go, right? This is where we can start, right? How do you analyze your performance? How do you analyze the performance in a subjective paper? On what basis can you analyze? Model answer, okay, you compare your answers with answers that have been provided. Second, anything else? Topper's copy. But I'm talking about this year's mains paper. After you come out of the examination hall, how do you analyze your performance? First, I think you can always look at it from the perspective of subject competence, right? How did my approach towards certain subject go? Did it go as expected? Were themes from areas which I anticipated, and if it was from the areas which I anticipated, was I able to deliver the kind of answers that I wanted to deliver? Another thing that you can always think of is that, you know, how much value addition and differentiation was I able to bring into my answers, right? This is a very easy thing to think of. When you look at the question, you could probably in a quantitative manner think of how many points you would have written, how many points were substantiated, whether I could integrate a diagram, a map, a schematic, a process chart, a table, anything into those diagrams. This is another way you can assess. Were you able to write answers in a holistic manner, right? Were you able to integrate inter-syllabus, inter-subject relevance into your answers? Were you able to replicate the kind of advices that you got between prelims and mains, right? Now, the timeline was only 89 days, and which is the same for next year also. Surprisingly, it's exactly 89 days next year also, right? And I always take out 2 weeks in the beginning and 2 weeks before mains. First is the speculation zone, right? You don't know whether you're clearing. Most people are in that shadow of I might clear, I might not clear. Next IAS key is saying this, some other key is saying something, and you speculate and lose 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks is panic and simulators. You don't have a lot of time to prepare. So you take out 4 weeks from those 89 days, you're effectively looking at less than 60 days, right? 50-55 days, right? Now, this is a time where most of you would have at least once or more thought what I would do if I had more time. If I got one more week, if I got one more month, what would I do, right? And that is something that constantly people come and tell us that, you know, sir, if the exam was next month, I would have performed much better, right? All those things which you felt like doing between prelims and mains, this is a window, right? Next 2.5 to 4.5 months is a window. I call it this period as a bonus attempt period. If you effectively utilize, right? This is as much time as you need to give one more attempt, right? If you could pull off as much as what you did in 89 days, imagine what you can do in 120, what you can do in 150, if you can maintain the momentum, right? Because now some of you would be thinking that you will get an interview call, so you are confused between preparing for interview, confused between preparing for mains. Some of you would be hypothetically thinking about changing your optionals. Anybody thinking of changing optionals here? This is one segment that comes, and I think the number of people who are looking at changing the optionals are the most from people who have not written a mains, because they have made a monster out of their subject because of peer performance or because of previous year performance of others, thinking that they have to change the optional, right? So when you look at this 89 days, this is what we are trying to apply in this bonus attempt, right? So we have to effectively utilize the next 2.5 to 4 months to address all the gaps that we felt, right? These gaps can be knowledge gaps, these gaps can be practice, notes or tools which you need to prepare. It can be things which you could have made your job much easier. All these things has to be addressed in the next 2.5 to 4 months, right? Now, see, what most people are doing is that they are focusing more on revision and less on application. I think 2 days after mains, one of the rankers who had appeared for mains this year came and met me, and he said, I had this much of notes and this much of answers that I had written, and this much of answers helped me more than this much of notes. Application of what you know into answers in a practical manner is likely to give you more reward than reading more and more, right? I think there is something called as generative learning. Generative learning is application based, right? So there is this famous quote about transparency, right, which says, whenever in doubt, sunlight, right? In sales, you say that, you know, whatever is the problem, sales is a solution, right? In UPSC mains preparation, whatever is the problem, writing is a solution. Writing is sunlight, because it exposes all the gaps, it exposes all the vacuum or, you know, inefficiency in your answer, right? So one of the things that we want you to extensively do in the next 3 to 2.5 to 4.5 months is extensively writing, right? Because this is the only time when you have enough time to write on everything. This is the time when you could have written all the PYQs. How many of you were able to effectively practice PYQs between prelims and mains? First few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, you would have been able to start out, but later you would have pulled out and went into test-based writing. So this is exactly the window when you can write PYQs. This is exactly the window when you can revise whatever content that you have done, right? So you will engage in revision, right? That's reading whatever you have. And this time when you are revising, the approach or the mindset should be revision to enhance, not to integrate, right? Revision to enhance means every time you are reading something, you should basically think of what more could have been done into these content. Whether it could have integrated current affairs into it, should I have integrated more value addition into it? Whatever you need to do has to be done here. Second, it is what do you call revision consolidation, right? Now, one of the most popular ideas that's going around now is consolidation through one-pagers, right? This is what everyone wants before their mains, something that they can revise and apply in their answers in a very short term, right? So we will target creating, I'll get into this later. Third is writing, right? Writing will be PYQ based writing and test based writing, right? You need to apply both things in your writing, right? PYQ based writing, I'll tell you what to look for and what not to do. And 4, I think we will basically look at the interview for, one second. Sorry. Okay. So, revision, consolidation, writing. Now, what we are suggesting is that you have 4 months between now and the time that you will focus on, right? Right? 4 months can be broadly divided into 1 month per paper, right? 1 month per paper, what we are expecting is 1 month for GS 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not looking at starting from 1 to 4, we are looking at going from 4 to 1 because I want you to be in a situation in December and January to be doing papers which are more aligned with prelims or interview than 4, 3 and 2 and 1, right? So when we are looking at paper 4, let's take each paper as a separate paper. What are the things that you are expecting to do, right? One, let's say we have 4 weeks for GS4, right? In each week, what we are expecting to do is, we are expecting to enhance our value addition and notes. We are expecting to create one-pagers on important keywords. I think we have counted 200 keywords across GS 1, 2, 3, 4. If you are able to create 200 one-pagers in the next 4 months, that would be quite useful while giving mains, right? 3, writing all the PYQs associated with the paper. Now, what we are suggesting is that for papers which are static in nature, like paper 4 and paper 1, last 5 years, right? We should try to solve last 5 years, all papers in the next 4 months. And in paper 2 and 3, we are looking at doing last 3 years papers and not last 5, because dynamically many of the things would have changed and context would have changed for these questions, right? Now, PYQs, one pages, and tests, solutions, especially the mock tests, right? The advantage of using mock tests is that the solution of these tests will also act as notes for you to enhance your existing content, right? So now, if I am looking at a particular theme, let's say if I'm looking at urbanization as a theme, my standard approach will be to refer to my standard sources. I will summarize, enhance into one pages, right? So what is this one pages? Again, I think there are different concepts of one pages, right? For me, one pages are documents which will help you revise quickly, which will help you have the most important gist of things which is relevant for the examination regarding that theme in 2 or 3 sides maximum, right? So if I take urbanization as a theme, I will first cover things which are basic information regarding this, right? The problems. I don't want you to elaborate on this. This should be largely keyword based. Solutions. I want you to think of a few introductions that can be used if a question on urbanization comes. This might be a quote, this might be a data, this might be a recent report, it might be a definition of a type of urbanization that is happening. So introductions, we can think of 2-3 introductions in for the particular keyword. Similarly, we can think of conclusions related to that keyword in advance, right? Can you find out some quotes related to this, preferably by senior government officials, ministers, prominent leaders and personalities? This can be integrated into your notes. Are there some recent books or journals or studies that has been done in this, right? So the idea is that if it comes down to one pages, it will get integrated into your answers, because one pages are more likely to be revised multiple times, right? Can you think of keywords which can be used in the context of the keyword urbanization, right? Agglomeration, amalgamation, or what do you call, circular economy. You will have to think of keywords which is associated with urbanization, which can be integrated into this particular thing, right? Quotes, solution, introductions, best practices. Can you take a best practice of urbanization from China, from South Korea, from Nordic countries, right? What are some of the schemes of the government that's being implemented by the government to address the problems related to urbanization? Can you think of some data, facts? Now, preferably don't give a prompt to AI and do this from scratch. It becomes a 5-minute job, right? The problem is that one, it is not giving Indian centric information. Two, it's hallucinating and making up a lot of information on its own, right? I don't know whether I've shared this. I think this year after prelims, we tried getting the prelims paper typed with OCR recognition, and it's only maybe half an hour later we realized that some questions have been altered, options have been altered. It hallucinates, and the problem is that it becomes your core material. You integrate into your system, you try to by heart it, and then it gets reflected in the paper, which is not good, right? But having said that, a lot of people bluff data, a lot of people make up content. We do not advocate this, because once a particular information or data is caught by the evaluator, then an element of doubt goes on everything else that you have written into the paper. So always try to mention this, and wherever you are doing this, always ensure that you have the sources. Now, I think in the coming years, what is going to happen is that value addition becomes more common. The quality of value addition will depend upon the source of the value addition being substantiated. If we go back 5 years ago into a paper 3 test written by a topper, we will not find even a single fact or data in a paper 3 5 years ago. Imagine that now, right? I think the last we counted, one of the toppers had 150, 200 data points in a paper. So when that becomes common, what is the next step? Substantiating from where you have taken these sources, this content, or accrediting it to a government source will get relevance, right? So one pages can be one for static topics. Let's say if you take a topic like fundamental rights, the approach towards static topics will be to summarize from your standard source, whether it's Lakshmikant or your class notes, into the document. The challenge will not be in static topics, it will be in dynamic topics and dynamic subjects, IR, security, science and tech, social justice. Here you will have to, search multiple sources and create the kind of content that is relevant in one pages, right? And this is going to take more time, because the chances of you deviating and losing attention and going, the problem with searching nowadays is that you'll always get a good suggestion of an article which you always wanted to read, or some video recommendation comes, or something happens, and before you know, you get deviated, right? So dynamic topics, I think emphasis will be on sources which is linked with accepted current affairs sources, whether it's Hindu, Indian Express, PIB, government sites, right? Then you have what do you call, one pages which are for subject specific keywords. This is also something that you can create, right? You can broadly classify the syllabus into GS1, into society, history and geography. So for each subject you can have subject specific keywords. You can also have subject specific diagrams. Your paper is not going to see diagrams and keywords and maps and codes by just visually thinking for it. It will only reflect in your paper if it is reflected in your notes. So There is no harm in having a paper 1 geography diagram compilations, which is something that you can do right now. One easy way to do this is to collect screenshots from toppers copies, which is publicly available, so that you can either replicate it on your own or keep that as a compilation for your reference, right? Subject specific diagram, subject specific keywords, right? Now, dimensions, frameworks, approaches. This is also something that you should compile at this point of time, right? If I get a question on agriculture, what kind of template or framework will I use? If I get a question on AI, what kind of framework or template can I use? So all these things have to be compiled with respect to every syllabus keyword. So we are looking at 200 syllabus keywords, and I think we can do 2 keywords per day, 2 to 3 keywords per day. If you are looking at 30 days per subject, that's 50 to 60 keywords per subject, right? So this is something that you will compile, right? Now, see, why we insist on writing vis-a-vis revision is that writing is something that gives you hands-on approach with respect to applying what you have learned. If you don't write, your ability to develop a muscle memory on applying that content into your answer is minimal. We run a program called AIM, some of you are part of it, right? In this, what we have realized is that the more answers you write, the more intersectionalities you see. The more answers you write, the more you develop abilities to apply diagrams, codes, keywords, etc. into your answers, right? We even had a topper, I think I've repeated this before, we had a topper this year who said that, I became ChatGPT. You can ask me anything at any point of time and I can write an answer on that particular keyword, right? Now, other than this, I think PYQs is something that we should integrate into our writing. PYQs, I think first thing is read, reread again and again. I think when you read a PYQ more than twice or thrice, you will see nuances and implicit demand that you did not see for the first time. Reading and outlining PYQs will always ensure that you develop an ability to have better question interpretation, right? This is something that you would have faced as a student who was writing mains, that you could not understand what UPSC is asking you at that spot under pressure, right? So use PYQs not just to write, use PYQs to write and outline. Outlining is where you don't write the whole answer, you write what is the demand of the question in terms of intro, in terms of body, in terms of conclusion, right? You don't write the whole thing, but you can broadly say that, okay, these are the headers, these are the keywords, this is how I will introduce. Then you enhance it, right? And this can be a good exercise. You enhance and write it, right? Don't go for an approach where you are writing first and then trying to enhance. First, go through reading the questions multiple times, understanding the outline or demand of the question, then enhancing the content that is required. Because if you write what is in your head, you will write only most likely an average version of that expected demand. The goal is to practice by writing much more enhanced answers, right? So write, and this will also be used as a revision material post mains, post prelims, right? Because most likely the first 2-3 weeks which is happening in post prelims, you do by starting with PYQs. Almost every student who has prepared for these examinations, their first warm-up exercise to write practice answer writing is PYQs. So this will also act as a reference material, because once you transition to prelims in February or January, the first set of answers that you write after December or January will be in June. So there will inherently be a 4-5 months gaps from what you wrote last, right? So PYQ integration into this, right? We are expecting that you will study 8 to 9 hours per day, right? This is a combination of time that you will give for GS and optional, right? This is we will always have to account for some time for IGP or interview, right? But effectively majority of the time will go to GS unless you have a high yield optional like mathematics or mechanical engineering or civil engineering, which if given more effort is likely to give more reward, right? If that is the case, then we can go for we can invert this, right? We have had people who have given excessive amount of time to such kind of subjects, physics, chemistry, mathematics, such kind of subjects can also be additionally provided, right? Now, on a given day, we say this, that at least 1 hour of writing should happen in a given day. This can be PYQ, this can be mock test questions which you have not completed. We will create 2 to 3 one-pagers. So see, we will effectively have a week's syllabus which will be broken into a day's syllabus, and in that day you will have themes to cover, and within that you will focus on one-pagers, you will focus on PYQs, and a version of this will apply for your optional also. There is no rocket science out there also. You have to practice writing PYQs, you have to enhance the content. One of the things that should always run in your mind is that what can I have 3-4 things on this theme which will differentiate my answer from others. And we have seen this among students who have done well in optionals in the past. We had a student, Wasim, I think he got 312 in anthropology, right? The schedule that he says he had between prelims and mains was 1 hour of PYQ writing for mains, 1 hour for prelims, 1 hour for optional, and he was constantly looking for new reports, new data, new studies on Google Scholar to enhance his answers, right? If you are writing what everyone else is writing, provided by teachers in the institutions around here, your answers are less likely to stand out. So you will have to take a conscious effort. It might be a difficult thing for you to do in the first mains, but when you're going for the second mains, you know where is the lacuna, you know where is the area of improvement, and this differentiation is something that you will have to integrate. So we'll give 40% of the time for optional, 60% of the time for GS. Within that 60% of time, every day you should engage. Either you start, I think my best advice would be to put the 1 hour of writing as a transition time between GS and optional. So you cover the theme or topic in the morning, you summarize it into a one-pager, solve the PYQs from that by afternoon, and then you transition into the optional paper, right? So this is something that you can integrate, right? Now, see, there are certain long-term things also which cannot be done between prelims to mains. My favorite among them is handwriting, right? Which does not shift overnight between prelims and mains. Now the window of 2.5 to 4.5 months is sufficient time. There are experts and institutions which is working on this area. Take some professional advice, right? Handwriting has a tendency to add 5 marks to your paper without changing anything. 20 marks across 4 papers is a difference of 100 ranks, right? So sometimes we undermine the ability of small things to make change. Usually if you are in that range of 375 to 400, a small change in the way you write, present, the way you add value to your answer has a potential to add half a mark to 1 mark per question, right? So pick up long-term projects. Handwriting is one. If you insist on changing an optional and if you are convinced that I should not be doing maths or law or whatever subject that you're doing, and this is a window, right? But the primary victim of changing an optional is that it will take 6 months of dedicated time. Whatever anyone says, people say that ye optional 4 months mein ho jayenge, but it never gets done in 4 months. It will take 6 months. It will have a direct dent on your GS. And see, I always have this logic that in any other optional that you're changing, you're trying to go from 0 to 270. In the optional which you are currently sitting where you feel vulnerable, you are probably trying to aim an improvement from 220 to 270. So the effective improvement of 50 marks versus 270 marks or 260 marks of improvement, right? Unless you have given 2 mains and it has not worked in your favor, don't go for an optional change at this point of time. If you have not given a mains and you are deciding to change optionals because your roommate has a different optional or because there is a trend that this optional is not doing well, I don't think it's right advice, right? Sometimes it's important to know what not to focus on, right? Now, the other thing that we want you to focus on is interview preparation, right? I'll tell you some of the basics of interview preparation, right? Interview preparation is broadly content and articulation, right? The difference between preparing for prelims, mains and interview is that in interview your response time is as little as 3 seconds, 4 seconds. You have to speak, you have to coherently build sentences and speak intelligently on issues. We all are really good at writing subjective answers because you get enough time to brainstorm, you organize, you have 7 minutes, 10 minutes. Imagine responding to a mains question on, let's say, maritime security in 3 seconds, right? Sometimes we undermine the difficulty of articulation despite of having knowledge, right? And what we have noticed among serious UPSC aspirants is that, you are socially cocooned, right? You rarely have intelligent conversations with seniors or in a professional set. I'm not saying you don't have intelligent conversations, but in the kind of setup that you are expected. Sitting in front of 5 senior people, senior officers who are sitting primarily to judge what you're saying, right? That's a very difficult position to be in, right? So the content will come from current affairs, it will come from your DAF, it will come from DAF inspired current affairs, and it will come from random things which you don't know why it's being asked to you. Right? We have had instances where a student of pol science has gone and he's getting questions on anthropology and he can't even say that I don't know, right? You're trying to answer, right? So questions are not always from everything that you know, right? See, the panel members are usually influenced to ask questions based on their inherent knowledge, based on what they have read in newspapers, based on their biases, right? We have always noticed this, when someone goes from Kerala, there is a very high chance of left politics, or when someone goes from Tamil Nadu, language protest, right? There are biases which influences the kind of questions panel members asks students, right? And it's to cater to those or counter the kind of biases that they have towards people from a certain region or community or whatever, that you have to prepare extensively on current affairs. Now, the thumb rule with respect to preparing current affairs is that the general assumption is that panel members are not reading Hindu and Indian Express, right? They are primarily consuming Times of India, Hindustan Times. This is a popular notion, right? There is no data, there is no survey conducted or anything. The assumption is that nobody wants to read such intense content once you get into service. You speak to any of your friends or roommates or seniors who have cleared service, ask them what newspaper they are reading. You will rarely hear the Hindu, right? So what we suggest is that you identify the issues that's being prominently being covered in these newspapers, but read it from Hindu and Indian Express. Issues will be covered in both newspapers, but certain issues will get more prominence in certain newspapers because that will have higher readability among their reader base. So if someone is consuming HT, they are more likely to read a certain type of content which is not on the front page of the newspapers that you follow, but which is inside. For a source of those content, I think Hindu and Indian Express will be still a better choice to form opinion and articulate. But identifying which issues to follow, I think it's always better to go for newspapers which are more popular in nature, right? DAF, what we are expecting is that if you have written mountaineering as a hobby and you have not done mountaineering for a long time, now is a good time, right? If you have written playing badminton and last time you played badminton was in 12th standard, now is a good time, right? So whatever you have listed out as hobbies, this 3 to 4 months window is a good time to brush up and warm up your experience and read up on it or practice it. A lot of people who have written trekking and they don't look like they trek, right? This happens. So you should look the part also, right? So DAF, I think prominently the keywords are your state, and from the state you need to have your basics as well as your dynamic content, right? When I'm saying basics, you should have a familiarity with respect to the schemes of the government. You should have a familiarity with respect to broad statistics of the government. What are you exporting? What are you importing? What is your population? What is your TFR? What is your, unemployment scenario? Where does your major revenue comes from? You should be able to develop, buy a notebook, write the keyword, start asking all possible questions, right? For this, one of the best sources is transcripts, right? Transcripts are documents or summary of experience shared by students who have attended interviews in the past, right? They list out, right? We have something called as a DAF question generator where we have organized almost 20-25,000 of questions of last few years. And what it does is that you put a keyword, right? you put Maharashtra, you will get 50-100 questions that has been asked to students from Maharashtra in the past, right? So we have organized it. It has not been activated. It usually gets activated after the interview results, mains results come out, right? Transcripts are an excellent source for understanding what kind of questions comes to someone from Bihar. What kind of questions come from someone from Bihar with civil engineering as an optional. Sometimes keywords in different parts of your hobby becomes intersectional in terms of asking questions, right? If you are someone who is a doctor and you have a hobby of, let's say, jogging, intersectional question of health implications on jogging in polluted areas like Delhi, right? You sometimes don't see the kind of connections which comes. There were some very interesting questions this year. I think for a student of sociology, I think one of the questions was asked that sociology or anthropology, if you were to make a cricket team of your favorite anthropologist, who will it be? You're not thinking like that, right? You are thinking of anthropology as a keyword, you're thinking of cricket as a keyword. You're not looking at intersection of anthropology and cricket as a joint thing. I think another interesting question which I remember is that, India is not playing Pakistan. Afghanistan does not have a women's cricket team. Should we not play Afghanistan also? From where did the question come and where did it go? I think the UPSC also has a challenge in creating such unique questions, because they are also aware that there's a lot of guidance and training happening outside of the commission, right? So transcripts are an excellent source for deciding state-based questions, state-based dynamic questions, also opinion-based questions. Form opinions without sounding like a bad person, right? Having balanced views, having language which can be expressed. In terms of interview, some of the basic things that you can work out in the next 3 months is posture. We are all used to sitting very comfortably, but when you have to sit in a panel room with your back straight in a particular posture, that's difficult. Your pace of speaking, this is extremely difficult to fix between interview, mains results and interview. Because this is one of the most common things which we have seen among people, that you speak extremely fast, that it becomes very difficult to decipher what you are trying to say. How do you, posture, pace, body language, excessive use of hand. This is something that we have seen among candidates who are appearing for interview. Their hand will be all over the place, right? And the setup of the panel is such that, their attention goes more towards your hands and your body movement than what you're trying to say, right? So current affairs, I think the most popular areas from which current affairs questions are being asked in IGP is economy, IR and polity, right? Otherwise, unless you come from Jammu and Kashmir, or you come from Chhattisgarh, or you come from certain regions where security angle is higher, it is influenced by other DAF keywords also, but as a general set, I think IR is extremely favorite. I think last time, I think there was so much change happening with respect to foreign policy and US, that questions were constantly being coming from there, right? I think the panel also does not likely get the DAF in advance, so they are also preparing from current affairs what is happening. So you will have to extensively prepare on current affairs and DAF based current affairs, right? So if you have let's say computer science as a subject, you should be extensively aware of all the latest developments in the field of computer science, including AI and generative learning and LLMs and comparison between different models and everything possible, right? The mindset is that, what would someone with an intelligent, well-read person look at a keyword in your DAF and the kind of questions that they will be prompted to ask, right? So one of the exercises that we suggest at this phase is to interact with professionals in the panel's age group. Spend more time, if you have parents, friends, or if you have some connection with some officers, interact with them, spend time with them, see what kind of questions they ask. And the beauty of interview questions is that it starts at a very basic level and it goes very deep very fast, right? It'll be like, question will be like, have you heard of AI in Hindi or English, in a very basic, and before you know, it will go into the nuances of AI and governance. So they have experience of application. You'll always feel that, this is a very basic question, I know, right? So watching mock interviews, this is a good exercise that you can integrate if you are expecting for an interview call, right? Go for profiles which is similar to you, from your state, from your educational background, from your institutions which you have studied. Don't over what do you call emphasize on it, because every person is unique, every person has a different personality, two people are different, right? So when sometimes what happens when we watch too many mocks is that we are trying to be someone else, and then you lose your natural self, and that personal touch is also extremely important, right? So mocks, transcripts, current affairs newspapers, it may not be a bad idea to form a small group of 2-3 people, meet up once in a while, maybe once in a week, with a pre-decided agenda, right? So that you don't deviate into something else. You can come together and say that this time we'll discuss about GST reforms, right? You frame questions, you ask each other, you speak, because speaking is something that will not get improved overnight. There are certain advices which seem cliche but has worked for people. Reading out loud newspaper, sitting in front of a mirror and reading, it has worked for people, right? It might sound I'm not the person who will do that, but it has worked for people. One of the suggestions which is around recording yourself speaking, then watching the video without a voice, seeing how your body language is, listening to the audio without the video, seeing where you are pausing, seeing where you are the kind of words which you are reusing again and again, right? All of us have those idiosyncrasies, like we have certain words which we keep repeating in our usage. Sometimes we have a very informal way of speaking which gets carried into the panel also. Yeah, like there are certain informal communication terms which comes into the panel, right? And these things cannot be fixed if you have interview in the first week. The worst thing that can happen is you clear prelims, you clear mains, and you get interview in the first week. And if it is your first interview, it's not a great feeling, because you will panic, right? It's likely to happen, right? So the interview preparation is something that we can start depending upon your stage of preparation and your ability or your presumed ability to clear prelims, clear mains. Focus a little bit on interview, right? Do things which can be useful for mains also. Current affairs, newspaper reading will have to be a habit, because the span of issues which the panel picks up is most likely 1 to 3 months, right? So if it is 3 months, this is the right window, right? Whatever is happening now, whatever is happening in the coming months is a perfect source for asking current affairs questions in interview, right? Now, other than this, watching mocks, hobbies, follow up all the latest developments in your hobby, right? This is a good place to start. If you are following badminton, if you have hobbies like reading about foreign policy, these kind of hobbies will have a higher tendency to expect greater depth from you. So prepare on this, right? And whenever you're watching mocks, look for a certain set of things, right? Understand the pauses, understand how they are dealing with questions which they do not know, understand how they are reacting when they are put under stress, understand when they are what do you call skipping, eye contact, body language, hand movement. Make a list of things which you are noting, right? So that you understand what is an ideal set of behavior that can be expected from you, right? Now, okay, another segment that we wanted to speak is people who did not do anything the last 3 months. Is there anyone out here who did not clear mains, did not appear for mains, but could not utilize the last 3 months? Okay, nobody will raise their hands, right? See, again, see, you might have not been able to effectively utilize the last 3 months because of a legitimate reason. You were preparing for another examination. Many of you are appearing for other examinations. It's understandable. But this examination is not for half-hearted people. This examination requires a certain amount of commitment and effort, right? And if you are not able to give it, you might as well move on. And especially if you have been in the cycle for 3-4 years, if it's not making sense, it's not a bad decision to move on and choose alternative career paths, right? Because I've met people who have not cleared prelims in 5 years, and you are expecting that in one attempt everything will happen. Might happen, not saying that, but the idea is to ensure that you are not in a sunk cost fallacy, what do you call, situation where you are over investing your time, right? But if you have partly utilized, or if you're looking at reviving your preparation in the next 4.5–5 months, following a 1 month based schedule with a very clearly defined daily, weekly and monthly target would be an excellent option, right? So here also I think we will go for GS 1, 2, 3, 4, every subject having 1 month of your time. This crowd will have to focus more on conceptual building, because you are not coming from a mains where you have applied and where you have revised. The advantage of the mains appearing crowd is that although maybe not to your satisfaction, you have at least done 1 round of reading for mains, just maybe 30 days or 45 days before, right? So you will have to focus on conceptual building. Note making is again essential, preferably 1 pages, right? And testing, right? Now there is this larger debate that should I join a program or not. Now I'll give my experience on this. We started a new batch of CAVA, right? The evening batch has started. The majority of students who are sitting in those classes are people who have already appeared for mains, or who have mains experience, or who have secured a rank, right? This crowd has a mindset which is more ideal with respect to this examination, where you know that you are not out of the cycle till your name is in the right spot. You know that if you take a break of 2–3 months, it's like starting from scratch, right? Because you have to continuously evolve, right? We have seen year after year students who secure ranks sitting in classrooms when the results are being announced, whether it's Meenal Karanwal a few years back or whether it is Sachin last year. Increasingly we see students who go with the mindset that I will do whatever it takes to clear this examination, right? And what a program does is that it gives you a kind of a structured preparation. It gives you a good peer group. It outsources your effort to someone or some initiative which reduces the amount of time that you will have to invest on something, right? There is nothing at this point of time that you cannot prepare on your own. But when you are enrolled in a program, you have a clearly defined schedule. You have a clearly defined target for the week, right? You have a test happening at the end of the week or end of the fortnight where you are able to apply and integrate whatever you have learned into your answers, right? It might seem futile for some of you, but I am of the opinion that you should be constantly pushing yourself with some kind of a target or some kind of a initiative which keeps you constantly on the check, right? And we have CAVA batch which started 2–3 days back. We have the MTS batch which is also starting tomorrow. We have a P2P batch which is prelims to prelims, right? And in this what we are trying to do is exactly what we are suggested with respect to your schedule: 1 month per paper, starting from paper 4, paper 3, paper 2, paper 1. It is a cumulative 48 test program, right, where each week has 3 tests. On every Tuesday you have a conceptual graded test, every Thursday you have a PYQ test, and every Sunday you have a evaluated test. Even if you just complete all the tests which is there in the 4 months duration, it is around 550 themes which is covered in that timeline, right? And those answers will become your notes. And on the same lines, current affairs validation program is something that has classes twice a week at this phase. It has graded assessment tests in every month. It has RRTs every week, and it gives you handwritten notes. It gives you PYQ workbooks to practice PYQs in the class, right? So all these things are integrated into this, right? You can choose according to you, right? This is being followed by a live answer writing session of 4 questions taken from PYQs. This will be taken by Mr. Danish. For students who are watching online, the PDF of this PYQ exercise sheet has been uploaded on the portal, so on the YouTube page. You can download it from there, right? Thank you so much.
Hello, audible everyone? Okay, so sir was talking about something about the illusion of mains. Now, recently I was like calling some of our mains appeared students and one common question that I asked everyone was, how was इस साल का मेंस आपका कैसा हुआ? And none of them said that कि सर खराब हुआ. Trust me, that is the feeling that majority of you will be having at this moment, जो जिन्होंने मेंस लिखा है इस साल कि हमारा मेंस तो अच्छा हुआ है, and it is only when the results are out we get that reality check. Right. Now, see, understand this, that when you are, you know, in this preparation of mains between prelims and the mains phase, so that phase in the exam is a very, you know, hectic phase. You cram up a lot, process very little. Right. And as a result, so when you are, you know, unburdened, आपने mains दे दिया है, you feel relieved and you feel good about yourself. But when you actually sit back with that paper and try to recall ki how was I feeling about this question in the exam hall, you will get a reality check. Right, and that is a very important exercise. See, this live answer writing is something that is, these things are important, PYQs and other things are important, but that is also a very important part of the process, that you should journal that memory, because that is your motivation to use this period effectively. I'm not talking about all the questions, but probably you should go back, and for those who have appeared means, go back and just look at that question and just write something how you felt when you got that this question in the exam hall. What were your exact feelings? Whether you will be able, whether you were able to attempt it comfortably, or did it challenge you, or right, that experience is very important. Now see what percentage of you know, what percentage of the paper are those questions. That is a second important question, because usually what happens, like GS ka paper you are given 20 questions, what we expect is that any good candidate should know 12 to 13 questions very comfortably, right? That is expected, no? Some 4 to 5 will be moderate, and 1 or 2 UPSC generally it will ask bouncers, and that is expected. For example, this year we saw some bouncers in GS1, GS2 opened with a bouncer. What are corrupt practices, right? So these things happen. This is part of the exam. I'm sure that is a difficult question for everyone, and you should not judge yourself on those questions, right? Now coming to answer writing, why it is important? Because see, when we wrote means, our focus was time, and our focus was कि we have to complete this with meeting the demand of the question with whatever content we know, and we don't have the luxury of time there. Time is a very important factor, right? And one of the most important aspects of this exam is meeting the demand of the question in time. And what we have seen in the last 8-10 years in experience of test series, that students fail in two major aspects in mains. One, understanding, decoding the demand of the question, the language of the question, and the second is articulation. Sir was talking about articulation as a very relevant factor in the interview phase. It is, because you are sitting in front of the panel and you have to articulate, you have to have a logical flow of arguments, but that is equally important in mains, right? So sometimes when you write an answer, maybe you are writing a very nice answer from your perspective, but when the other person reads, maybe it's very incoherent, right? And it doesn't make sense. So you have one exercise sheet in front of you. All of you have, right? All of you have received. I'll not take a very rigorous answer writing here. Okay, so don't think that this will stretch for another 1 hour. So what I want is, you have 4 questions here. The first question is this year's polity question, and you know, I have picked up one of the easy questions that was asked. So what I expect from you is, I'll give you 5 minutes and you just structure the question for me and give me the key dimensions. Do not write a full-fledged answer. Explore the dimensions. What would be the structure and the key demand of the question? That is what I'm expecting. Take your time. Yeah, anyone who has figured out what is the core demand of the question, what is the examiner trying to ask? Anyone who appeared in mains this year, आप बताओ. हाँ, first question. राइट, इट इज लार्जली अबाउट द अमेंडमेंट पावर. सो थीमेटिकली तो हम समझ सकते हैं कि सिलेबस किस एरिया से है. नाउ कमिंग डाउन टू द क्वेश्चन, इट्स अ स्टैटिक क्वेश्चन, आई बिलीव फेयरली स्टैटिक, राइट, है ना. नाउ what is the exact question? Can I just have this question? Yeah, so it is saying that Indian Constitution has been conferred the amending power on ordinary legislative institutions with a few procedural hurdles. In view of this statement, examine the procedural and substantive limitations on amending power of the parliament to change the constitution. So first and foremost important, context based question. There is a context provided. So what do we do in context based questions? Address a context. Now there are two types of context based questions. One where context in question diverges, one where context in question converges. This is an example of convergence. Read the question again. You see, whatever the context is asking, the question follows, right? If you go through PYQs, and this is the time how you analyze PYQs, that you have to see how UPSC models its question. UPSC question का एक specific language होता है, and that language has a huge impact on the structure of the answer. For example, if the context and question are diverging, you have to address the context as a part of the question, right? आपको उसको as a part treat करना है, because फिर आप जब main demand address करोगे तो वो context कहीं आएगा नहीं. But जहाँ converge करता है, so हम उसको introduction के बाद एक paragraph में summarize कर सकते हैं, and then we can move to the core demand. Now coming to the main core demand of the question, what is a question asking about? What do we do with the procedural and substantive limitations? क्या करना है उसका, हाँ बताइए. Right. Yes. So procedural are basically provided by the constitution. Substantive is those restrictions that are not originally in the constitution but have been judicially imposed, right? Now the question is also carrying an important directive. You have to examine them. Can you examine a fact? There are procedural limitations, there are substantive limitations. Examine क्या करना है यहाँ पे? Whether there are certain challenges with these limitations. Application तो है ही है. Examine का मतलब दो तीन aspect होता है कि whatever you are saying. For example, I am talking about procedural limitations here. Procedural limitations are what? Amendments are to be initiated only in the parliament, not in state legislature. Pre-legislative scrutiny can be done, right? Committees को भेज सकते हैं. अभी recently 130th amendment bill है, वो committee पे चली गई, है ना? So those are some procedural aspects. उसके बाद जब bill table होगा तो 2/3 majority से पास होना है, special majority है. अगर federal setup को touch करता है, then half of the states need to ratify it, right? So these are procedural hurdles with respect to whatever is provided in the constitution. Now what are substantive limitations? Sorry, BSc, basic structure doctrine. Yeah, what else? ओके, जुडिशियल रिव्यू ऑफ आर्टिकल 13, हाँ कोई कह रहा था, कुछ और कह रहा था, डेफिनेशन ऑफ लॉ, ओके 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 ओके, constitutional morality, okay, anything else? Yeah, so this is the important aspect that you need to now carefully think about. Procedural aspect सब ने सही बताया मुझे, ऑलमोस्ट जितने लोगों ने जो भी बताया 368 ये है वो है, सब सही है. when we are coming to discuss the substantive aspect, yes, one important key aspect was basic structure doctrine. Someone said, again not to criticize but to highlight ki what happens when you cram up things in very fast pace. Someone said definition of law under article 13. Well sir, that is wrong. Constitutional amendments are not law as per article 13, right? If they are laws, then constitution will not never be, we will not be able to amend any part which infringes on fundamental rights and basic structure to hai hai. So this was interpreted in Keshwanand Bharti because Golaknath ne ye judgment diya tha. Indeed they are within the definition of laws and that was overturned, right? So they are not laws. Someone said judicial review. Now here comes the important aspect कि जब आप जुडिशियल रिव्यू बोल रहे हो, जुडिशियल रिव्यू अंडर आर्टिकल 13 एंड आपका पहला आर्ग्यूमेंट है सब्सटैंटिव लिमिटेशन में बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर डॉक्ट्रिन, तो ये मुझे बताइए कि व्हेन केशवानंद भारती जजमेंट इट हैपेंड, डिड पार्लियामेंट एक्सेप्ट द बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर डॉक्ट्रिन? नो, इट डिडंट. वाज द बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर डॉक्ट्रिन एवर ट्राइड टू बी अमेंडेड और चेंज्ड? इफ सो, व्हाट जजमेंट? 42nd Amendment Act tried to change basic structure. 42nd Amendment Act tried to introduce two provisions under 368. Go and read 368 clause 4, clause 5. What was clause 4? That any amendment cannot be called before the courts for judicial review. And clause 5 is there is no restriction on the power of the parliament to amend the constitution. Both were nullified in Minerva Mills. Reinstating judicial review as a part of basic structure. Now what I am trying to say, that judicial review is the point in this answer, but the way you are articulating it in the exam hall, someone writing this trying to establish that substantive limitation and someone just mentioning that, that's a huge difference. And this is the time where you learn these things. Are you able to understand what I am trying to say here? कि अभी आपने बहुत कंटेंट पढ़ा है, नाउ यू नीड टू लुक फॉर बेटर वैल्यू एडिशंस, बेटर वे ऑफ आर्टिकुलेशन. एंड इज दिस क्वेश्चन ऑन सब्सटैंटिव लिमिटेशन, इज इट अ न्यू क्वेश्चन और इज इट PYQ? इट्स अ PYQ, या. In 2019 UPSC asked a similar question, can the parliament amend the basic structure? Substantive limitations, Minerva Mills, the parliament did try to amend the basic structure, 42nd Amendment Act, right? Then finally it was cemented in the IR Coelho judgment, है ना? एक और सिंग, हाँ बोलिए. राइट, सी दिस इज एन एस्पेक्ट, लाइक आपने किस तरह से उसको लिखा है, मैं आपसे जो समझाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. सी देयर आर नो परफेक्ट, देयर इज टाइम लिमिटेशन. व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज कि हाउ दिस आंसर कुड हैव बीन वेरी नाइसली रिटन. Whatever you have written is not incorrect. Say a person is writing basic structure, judicial review, protection to fundamental rights, these are all core points. What my focus on this answer is about how you articulate it, right? For example, fundamental rights, protection to fundamental rights, this judgment, the conception of harmonious construction, it came in Minerva Mills because the parliament tried to erode fundamental rights, no? Isn't it? So when you are writing a UPSC mains and you are trying to have that edge, sir was talking throughout about having that edge, not writing an answer but writing an answer to have edge. अब मैंने जो शुरू में आपसे बोला था कि से एन एवरेज एस्पिरेंट हैज 12 to 13 क्वेश्चंस which are thoroughly known to him. These 12 to 13 questions are his edge. If you are missing out on substantiation, articulation in these 12 to 13 questions, you are potentially losing out on 15 to 20 marks. ये वो क्वेश्चंस है जहां आप एक एक दो दो मार्क्स का लीड ले सकते हैं उनसे जिन्होंने एवरेज आंसर लिखा है, बिकॉज जो मॉडरेट है और डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन है वो आपके लिए भी शायद मॉडरेट या डिफिकल्ट होगा. I hope this is clear. Right. Now, basic structure doctrine, fundamental rights protection, again harmonious construction happened in Minerva Mills because Parliament tried to implement, the 42nd Amendment Act tried to create that exclusion of Article 40, 1931 for all fundamental rights, 39 BC directive. And then we have separation of power. What's it established as a substantive limitation? NJAC case. है ना? Federalism, is it a substantive limitation? Yes. SR Bomai. So these are the core aspects of the answer. I think majority would be knowing them. What I am emphasizing on is the articulation of it with relevant judgments, data, fact, example, whatever you have for that particular answer. Now the second more important thing is to have this clarity that the question is talking about examine. Then you should bring out some issues. Are there issues in the procedural hurdles that the question is talking about? What are the issues in Indian amending process? Yeah, that is one, because एक bypass, लेकिन वो amendment नहीं होता ना, वो ordinary legislation के लिए true है. Have clarity. Sorry? Yeah, states cannot initiate, or rather in certain cases state become a bottleneck. राजीव गांधी की सरकार के पास 400 से ज्यादा लोग थे. 64th कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट बिल, पंचायती राज, इट फेल्ड. लक्ष्मीकांत में ये फैक्ट, अपने एंड से नहीं बता रहा हूं, है ना. सो इवन अ पार्लियामेंट दैट हैज द रिक्वायर्ड नंबर्स may not be able to initiate an amendment because the states have ganged up against parliament. The same happened in GST. When Modi ji came to power, he initiated and the states revolted. So that is one aspect, right? Sometimes fragmented parliament is there and having the 2/3 consensus is very difficult. Women reservation bill is a classic example. 25 साल से पड़ा था parliament के पास. So practical hurdles. See, none of the things that I am saying is not known to you. We are not discussing content here. What we are trying to discuss is articulation. How do you think on the right lines? Keep your answer simple. Use facts, examples known to you better to your advantage. और ये सब कुछ आपको 6 से 7 मिनट में करना है. So what I would suggest, and sir also has said in this session, that you have to make best use of PYQs. See, if you are doing just 5 years worth of PYQs, for polity you will be solving 50 questions. But trust me, out of those 10 questions next year, you will get 5 similar questions. Both in theme and some part of the question will be overlapping with PYQ. I'm not saying the entire question will be overlapping, but thematically, जब इस तरह के क्वेश्चंस आते हैं जो स्टैटिक होते हैं, then you probably get one part which is very similar, and one part getting similar is a huge relief. आपका 2 मिनट बच गया एग्जाम में, बिकॉज वो आप मेमोरी रिकॉल से लिख सकते हो, आपको कुछ सोचना नहीं. Getting your point? What are the issues with basic structure doctrine? I would say ambiguous. Yeah, right. So there is a lack of clarity on what would constitute, what features would constitute. It is ever evolving, right? Someone said constitutional morality. I don't want to know who, but understand that constitutional morality does not have the same effect as basic structure. In fact, this doctrine of constitutional morality, when it came, the Attorney General that time said that the way courts are using it, judiciary will soon become the third chamber. Right. So that is why you see in recent times courts have left the idea, but UPSC has hung on to it. So UPSC constantly हमें परेशान कर रही है लेकिन अभी बहुत ज़्यादा कोई जजमेंट रिसेंट टाइम्स में आया नहीं है जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी पे बहुत ज़्यादा हिंज्ड है, एंड इट इज समथिंग दैट इज अगेन I would say that ki very limited content on that, so should not be used in the answer as such, right? Particularly for a question like this. Okay, so I hope this is clear. When we are talking about substantive limitations, issues with basic structure, like judiciary is not democratically elected judges, that is definitely one aspect. Ambiguity of basic structure in itself, that is one aspect. And अगर आप ये 3-4 पॉइंट्स आप लिमिटेशंस में लिख रहे हो तो विद इन टाइम फ्रेमवर्क दिस आंसर इज डन, उससे ज्यादा हमारे पास बैंडविड्थ नहीं है, देन सिंपली कंक्लूड करना है, राइट? सो सी what the idea of choosing this question was to make you understand that PYQs are ever relevant. It's a 15 marker. Procedural aspect I think everyone would know. Substantive में हो सकता है, some people might be having some issues, but by and large everyone would know. So everything will come down to articulation. The way you have articulated with proper substance, case laws. और अगर आपने 2019 का वो PYQ सॉल्व किया तो you would definitely know the fact about Minerva Mills that 368 was amended. That answer cannot be written without that judgment. है ना? So take more effort, more time in solving PYQs. Let us proceed to the next question. It's a society question, not from this year, but an interesting question. Yeah. देखो ये एक पॉलिटिकल डिबेट है और ये क्वेश्चन कहीं से भी पॉलिटिकल डिबेट पे नहीं है, राइट? और अगर हमारे पास कंटेंट नहीं हो तो हम डेफिनेटली कुछ सोचेंगे, लेकिन एनफ कंटेंट है, गेटिंग अ पॉइंट? हाँ, तो सोसाइटी का क्वेश्चन है, टेक 4-5 मिनट्स, ट्राई टू स्ट्रक्चर इट. Anyone completed? You made the structure. Why I chose this question is because UPSC has asked a question on secularism in the last 10 years. They have asked it 4 times. Very prominent theme across society. And this year they didn't ask, maybe next year they will ask again. ऐसे ही होता है, हर 2-3 सालों में वो repeat करता है. What is the demand of the question? Tell me. Right. Whether वो language क्या है, वो बहुत important है. The question starts with R. R, tolerance, assimilation, pluralism, key elements in making of the Indian form of secularism. And then the question ends with justify your answer. So cumulative reading of the entire question, what are we supposed to do with this question? Right, true, completely true. And see, UPSC did not ask very difficult questions in society this year, I believe. It was fairly simple. Yes, last 2 years they were asking about role of civil society organization. This year there was a bouncer on civil services. But again, within your range, if you have studied, I think bana के तो लिखा ही होगा लोगों ने, है ना? So, but the thing is that those classic, these are some of the classical questions of UPSC. Now R का मतलब क्या होता है? क्या? You deciphered correctly कि R का मतलब होता है क्या? Whether these 3 are the key elements in making of the Indian form of secularism. Now society questions, you have to be very spot on with the context. We cannot deny that tolerance, assimilation and pluralism are not key ingredients in the form of in making of Indian secularism. Can we deny it? We cannot. So what is going to be the structure? Now tell me. It's something that they have asked a universal truth. It's a statement of fact, no? We cannot deny tolerance, assimilation or pluralism not being part of, right? Yeah, you can define it. Indian form of secularism, principal distance approach, right? Everything you can write, no problem. Coming to the core demand, that is where the major marks is, no? हाँ, जस्टिफाई करना है, वो एग्जाम्पल तो हम डालेंगे, स्ट्रक्चर तो बताओ पहले. Yes, we will definitely first try to show that yes, tolerance is a very key element of Indian form of secularism, and our secularism is rooted in our cultural identity, in our shared history, that I would say. So you can take up historical examples, Akbar policy of Sulekul, Ashoka's policy, Ashoka's Dhamma, right? And throughout we have been tolerant with various religions who has made India their homeland. You can give example of Parsis, etc., etc., right? So tolerance तो है हमारे civilizational history में है. Then comes assimilation. What is assimilation? Yes. So mixing of a subculture into a dominant culture. Can you give me any evidence of assimilation? Right. So that is an example, a legal example, maybe more societal example. Tribal culture, yes, we can give an example of assimilation. Something else? That is traditionally not. I am just letting it go because I am not being very critical of your answers. Something I want to hear something in, like something that can be universally accepted as assimilation. Yeah, but see, I'll tell you again, as he just said, that is something that is legal. Hindus, Jains, Sikh, etc. has been defined to be Hindus as per the constitution. That was done for convenience, I would say, right? What are better examples of assimilation? Sorry, you can say take examples. Can't you think of examples like Sufism, Bhakti movement? Sorry, architecture, yeah, Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. That is an example of assimilation, no? Assimilation in language, for example, the birth of Urdu. It is partly Hindi, partly Punjabi, partly Persian. There are many examples in history, right, which show assimilation of culture, assimilation of language, right? And pluralism is basically celebration of the differences. You know, too many religious, cultural, ethnic diversity staying together at one place, है ना? Now what is UPSC trying to ask extra in this question? देखो ये तो है, हम डिनाई नहीं कर सकते कि टॉलरेंस, pluralism, assimilation, these are core ingredients of Indian form of secularism. But is Indian secularism just rooted in these things? No. Can someone tell me where it is rooted? Okay, give an example. Tolerance का part है यार brother. Like principled intervention. Okay. Now that is something that is, yes, a very important aspect, and I wanted to, you know, like मैं समझना चाह रहा था कि whether you have figured out. See, India had a very troubled partition, and the constitution makers were very clear that we cannot leave it to the public कि वो secular होंगे कभी. So that secularism has to be rooted in the Indian constitution, and that secularism is indeed rooted in the Indian constitution. Rights, cultural and educational rights to ethnic religious minorities, right to religious freedom. So secularism in India is very different. Unlike France, UPSC has asked that question also. It is cemented in you know, public laws and values. Are you getting my point? So now I hope you understand that your answer for many of you would end at showing that tolerance, assimilation, pluralism. But if you want to get that edge, think beyond these things that is just there, implicit. मतलब जो सॉरी जो explicit है क्वेश्चन में, उसके बियॉन्ड आपको implicit aspects को भी सोचना पड़ेगा. See, you can open, but the question in no way is asking you. वहां पे कोई critical directive नहीं है. For example, कहीं critically, you know, examine whether these are, ऐसा कोई language नहीं है. The question is asking you two things. Are these things the core elements of Indian form of secularism? And you have to justify your answer, means you have to give examples, right? And within that R is an implicit aspect that okay, these definitely are there, but there are some other aspects also, which in today's times are more relevant, है ना? Okay, I hope this is clear. Can we move on to the third question? Yeah. Take 3-4 minutes, and this is probably the last question that we'll discuss today. Yes, anyone has completed? GS3 questions, there is very little to do with demand or structure, fairly straightforward होते हैं, right? But वहाँ पे भी कभी कभी हमें you need to understand that what is priority in GS3, and this question is about prioritization of your content, right? So first part fairly simple. I believe everyone can distinguish between the care economy and the monetized economy. Now coming to the second part, what is the question asking? What is the question asking? Yeah, so how are we going to ensure that women move from care economy to monetized economy? So what would be your suggestions, or what are your suggestions that you have written? Right. Mhm. In fact, GS2 also they ask this similar question, capacity building to women empowerment, right? My question is कि ये जो आप अप्रोच बता रहे हो वो तो ठीक है, बट अल्टीमेटली द एग्जामिनर इज गोइंग टू रीड कंटेंट, है ना? तो कुछ वर्किंग स्टेप्स जो आप सजेस्ट कर सकते हो, कुछ अप्रोचेस जो आप, या प्लीज. Right, okay, okay, fine, fine. You said first point is your SHG, right? What would be your example to substantiate कि self help groups को बढ़ावा देना है? Isn't it being done? Community kitchens, okay, okay, elaborate. नहीं, मैं समझ रहा हूँ, यही प्रॉब्लम होती है. सो यू हैव, आपने बहुत कुछ पढ़ा है, मैं समझ सकता हूँ, राइट? इफ यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट एसएचजी, योर फर्स्ट जो दिमाग में आना चाहिए वो कुदमश्री होना चाहिए, बिकॉज दैट इम्फेसिस ऑफ कुदमश्री इज ऑन लाइवलीहुड जनरेशन. उसको मॉडल करके भारत सरकार ने कुछ किया है रिसेंटली, लखपति दीदी, है ना? इजंट इट? सो हमारा फोकस उस पे होना चाहिए, इनकम जनरेशन, बिकॉज द इंटायर क्वेश्चन इज अबाउट हाउ डू वी मूव देम फ्रॉम केयर इकोनॉमी टू मोनेटाइज इकोनॉमी. एंड व्हाट इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट? a legal recognition of such activities within the formal economy. For example, Anganwadi workers, they are also into care economy only, but there we can measure it. The problem with care economy is we are not able to measure with the economic indicators that we are having at this moment. But जो आंगनवाड़ी workers हैं उनके लिए we have a benchmark to measure. So a formal recognition, right? Is the government of India doing something to promote women empowerment so that they are moving from care economy to monetized economy? Is the government doing something? आपने इकोनॉमिक सर्वे का एग्जाम्पल दिया, आई थिंक एक साल पहले के सर्वे में वो आया भी है. सॉरी, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप है, वो एग्जाम्पल है, मैं डिनाई नहीं कर रहा हूँ, बट this is something that you need to understand कि right now you should focus on content that stands out. मिशन शक्ति का नाम सुना आप लोगों ने, आई एम श्योर सुना होगा. What is so unique about मिशन शक्ति? मिशन शक्ति has a life cycle approach for a woman. It has two components, safety and empowerment. One component is focusing on child safety, बचपन से बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ, right? When she is growing, her safety, and the second aspect is talking about her empowerment. And for working women, there is Sakhi Nivas, working women's hostel component in Mission Shakti. There is Palna, creche facilities. Why do women migrate out of monetized economy? Because these are the facilities that are lacking, no? So Mission Shakti is a very good example to give here. If someone gives, the examiner is going to appreciate it. Then coming to policies, isn't government having policies on the ground to ensure that women are into formal jobs? क्या है, कोई एक पॉलिसी है जो आप बता सकते हो? यस, राइट, yes, that can definitely be added. I'm talking about some recent, आप मेंस की प्रिपरेशन फेज में रहे होंगे, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट जजमेंट केम, के उमा देवी वर्सेस स्टेट ऑफ तमिलनाडु. Can anyone recall the judgment and tell me what happened there? Maternity Benefit Act is part of women's reproductive rights and is secured under Article 21. Means अब Maternity Benefit Act को Article 21 का protection है. Because of Maternity Benefit Act, there is a problem that is called motherhood penalty, which again survey has recognized कि more and more companies are not hiring such women because they will have to give 26 weeks of leave, paid leave, that too. So now Supreme Court has come harder कि it is a part of her fundamental right. Fundamental right means now there is some teeth to it. We will have to see the developments, how it goes from here. But it's a very important development. ये इस साल आया है, लेकिन अगर फ्यूचर में भी कभी यूपीएससी इस तरह का कोई क्वेश्चन पूछता है, this should be added, right? Anything else that we are missing? Yeah, so very good. लेकिन अब आप जो जिस लाइन पे जा रहे हो वहां नहीं जाना है. Safety is a big concern. Recent 2 years we have seen a lot of protest on POSH Act, right? Now understand that the people who have been protesting regarding failure of implementation of POSH Act have been in the formal setup. फॉर्मल सेटअप में क्या है, 50 से ज्यादा लोग हैं तो हमें क्या बनाना होता है, right? But the vast majority of Indians, they are working in the informal sector, and the informal sector there is big problems with the POSH Act. If you ever get time, you should read about the issues of POSH Act in the informal sector, right? And that is a concern here. So that needs to be revamped. देखो पॉइंट ये है कि ये कंटेंट फ्री में अवेलेबल है आपके पास, इट्स देयर इन मैगजीन्स, इट्स देयर इन न्यूज़पेपर्स. व्हाट मैटर्स इज कि हाउ यू नो get those in your notes and how you process them now and use it in your answer writing. Because if the examiner is getting points which are more logically correlated, see what is the issue in mains, now coming to our discussion. हमारा मेंस में इशू ये नहीं होता कि हमें नहीं आता, मैंने स्टार्टिंग में भी कहा था, हमारा इशू ये है कि हम जो लिखते हैं वो कनेक्ट नहीं करता विद द डिमांड ऑफ द क्वेश्चन. That is the single biggest issue that I see students facing, that the way they write their answers, it doesn't resonate with the demand of the question, right? Their choice of examples are outdated. Their value addition, the argument that they are taking and the example they are giving, there is no sync. Maybe both are correct, but there is no sync, right? And on a prioritization scale, when they are writing solutions, वो solution में जो दिमाग में पहले आ रहा है वो लिख रहे हैं. Now I understand that is a challenge, but that is a challenge that you need to work on now, because next year I hope that you guys clear, but it is also a reality that UPSC is a very brutal exam, it's right. So if you are not clearing this year, one thing that you need to do for next year, as sir was saying something about one pagers. Now advantage of one pagers, like so many people have problems answer writing. कहना आसान है, but writing 3 answers a day very difficult, right? On a consistent basis very difficult, trust me, difficulty होती है. So you should find out innovative measures which keeps you motivated. For example, if you are writing answers on few weeks and if you are not able to get that necessary motivation, you can convert that answer writing exercise into a 1-pager exercise based on PYQ themes. most of you would be having access to PYQ questions last 10 years. Market में मिल जाएगा book आपको. At least thematically look at what themes UPSC is asking again and again. At least make a one pager on that. And how to make a one pager? If you just spot a particular theme, for example, secularism. UPSC has been asking, I told you multiple times, but what is the focus on? The focus is on differences in Indian secularism versus Western secularism. This is a question that we just discussed. This is one type of question under secularism, where it is talking about key ingredients of Indian form of secularism. You integrate the entire idea that you are getting from the PYQ questions into a one pager. And trust me, next time if UPSC asks a question, you will find one of the parts of those questions implicit from this. And if you narrow down, if you are just doing 5 to 6 years also, you will get not more than 60-70 themes. But these 60-70 themes would cover at least 1/3 of the question that is going to come in next mains. Trust me on that. 1/3 questions तो यहीं से आएंगे. Then there will be some questions, maybe they don't have a PYQ linkage, they have a current affairs linkage. And then there will be some moderate and hard questions which you will have to generate content on the spot there only. But that is true for everyone. You're not no exception there. So what we can work on is the questions that we can predict. Unfortunately, there is no other way other than PYQs, and this is a time where you should take it very seriously. If you are facing discipline issues, you should probably join a program, right, for answer writing. If there is no discipline issues, write, whoever you consider a mentor, reach out to him, right, he will guide you there. And the fourth question is for your homework, like you guys can write, and probably if you want, you can reach out, you can mail it to me on danish.khan@nextias.com. Right, so this is my email ID. You can mail your answers to me. I'll definitely revert. I always revert. Right. So that is it. Any questions? Any questions you have? Anyone? On anything, strategy, preparation, how to go about certain things, any particular paper? Feel free to ask. No questions? Okay then, thank you. Thank you everyone.